Okay, today we're going to talk about discipline in the language classroom. Discipline is part of classroom management. Classroom management has lots of different elements besides discipline. But today we're only going to look at discipline. In another session, we'll look at the other aspects of classroom management. So when we talk about discipline, what are we actually using in the classroom? What techniques, what strategies are we using to actually achieve discipline in our classroom? Well, the first thing that you can do is create a code of conduct with your students. You can actually, it's very important to make an agreement with them at the beginning of the course about how everybody is going to work in the classroom. Make a set of rules, put them on the wall, and every time there's a discipline problem, refer to those rules. The second element I've put in inverted commas, that this is actually a quote from Jeremy Harmer, whose book I've taken these ideas from chapter 9 of the Practice of English Language Teaching. And he says students who are interested and enthusiastic do not generally exhibit problem behavior. And for me, this is perhaps the biggest cause of discipline problems in the classes that I've taught and the classes that I've observed. Students who are bored, students who don't want to do what you've decided to teach them, are going to cause problems. So it's important to agree the topics that you're going to teach with the students. It's a little bit difficult in a school where the syllabus is decided for you. Maybe the curriculum is a government curriculum and you need to follow it. But even within that, you can negotiate certain things with the students and agree with them what they would like to study. If you're actually doing things in class that they've asked for, they're more likely to be interested and engaged, and therefore you're less likely to have discipline problems. The third element, which is very important in creating discipline, is to be disciplined yourself. If you ask your students to arrive on time, you should also arrive on time. If you ask your students to do their homework, you should correct that homework in a timely fashion and give it back to them with useful feedback. Lead by example, in other words. The fourth element of creating discipline in the classroom is to have a good relationship with your students. This doesn't mean being their friends, but it's very important that you create rapport. If the relationship with your students is bad, they are not going to cooperate, and especially teenagers are going to misbehave in your class. So it's very important that you listen to them, that you gain their respect, that you show them who's boss, but not in an aggressive way, and have a very good teacher-student relationship. If there are serious discipline problems, if somebody needs to be corrected, for example, if they're teenagers and one of them puts their feet up on the desk and they refuse to work, you should act immediately. You should correct the problem immediately. That's extremely important. Don't let the problem snowball from one day to another, or certainly don't leave it a few weeks before you deal with any problems that you have in your class. It has to discipline problems. They need to be dealt with immediately. The next element is being hard on the problem and not the person. So if the problem is that the student has their feet up on the desk, the problem is that their feet is up on the desk. The problem is their behavior, not them themselves. It's extremely important that you don't attack or reprimand the person themselves. They're not the problem. It's their behavior that's the problem, and that needs to be made very clear to them and to everybody else in the class. Try to use positive language don't prohibit things in your classroom. So rather than saying don't speak your mother tongue in the classroom, make a suggestion. Let's all try to speak English. And using that positive language just puts a positive spin on the situation, and you're less likely to generate negative feelings in your students. Try to reprimand in private if you can. If necessary, have a witness there with you, a fellow teacher or your coordinator, so that there are no misunderstandings later on. It is better not to expose or exhibit your students in front of their peers. It's especially for teenagers. They hate being different from their peers. So it's better to talk with the student about the discipline problem in private. Keep calm. It's very important not to lose your cool. Especially teenagers, but adults sometimes as well, will try to provoke you and try to make you angry, but don't fall into the trap. Keep calm, and that will help you to enforce discipline in your classroom more easily. And finally, this isn't always possible because not all institutions do support their teachers as they should, but use the institution to back you up. Use the institution's discipline process to help you to enforce discipline in your classroom. If somebody misbehaves, send them to the coordinator. If there are consequences in the school rules for misbehaving in class, use those consequences to deter any misbehavior on the part of the students. So these are all very basic things. There's nothing new here, but I think it is very useful for us to remind ourselves of this very important part of classroom management, which is creating discipline in the language classroom. I hope this has been useful. So see you next time for interaction patterns. We'll be looking at another aspect of classroom management, classroom interaction patterns.